That's right, everybody. It's the return of the Severance podcast here on RHAP. We know scripted TV. We know Severance. We know severance.com. And we are talking about all things Severance here on this very podcast as we are rewatching season 1 of Severance on the road to the January 17th return of Severance season 2 after nearly 3 years away. We're very excited about this, and we're very excited to talk about this week's episode based on the riveting, soon-to-be best-selling novel, The You Are. I'm Josh Wigler. I am joined by the she is Mandy R, Dr. Amanda.
Hello, Joshy W. Very excited to be back here discussing this episode. I feel like this is where the show really hits its stride in terms of firing on all cylinders. This is the episode that brings us an acrostic poem experience, and I would be remiss if I did not prepare acrostic poem experience for this podcast.
Okay, is the poem called Melissa? And this is like a great way to introduce Melissa onto the podcast.
Let's introduce Melissa, because I'd hate for
Melissa. Did you prepare an acrostic poem?
No, I did not. I feel so. But to be fair, Amanda is the queen of the acrostic poem. She read one to Michael Chernus back in the day, which is incredible, and I've still
Ricken
not
himself.
over it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I'm good. I do hear a crying baby though. Is that happening on your end?
I hear a mumbly guy. Melissa,
a little bit of a mumbly.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my tummy.
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Not enough shriveled raisins in the vending machine today.
Never enough. All
right. Well, we're waiting on you.
Okay.
We cannot proceed any further without an acrostic.
Rewatch.
Ooh.
An acrostic poem experience. R is for reliving the moments that made us smile. E is for every scene a journey, mile by mile. W is for woven stories that never grow old. A is for again, we discover tales they told. T is for time rewinds and joy ignites. C is for cherished memories fill our days and nights. H is for heart's delight in the familiar view, because the you are is you.
Oh, wow. And you know what? It's details like these that make the We Know Severance podcast Ben Stiller's personal favorite Severance podcast.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
Not in his exact words,
on
but
the World Wide Web. Am I misquoting? I hope
we did get amplified by Ben Stiller on the American Thanksgiving. I posted the pod, which released on that day, and I was cheeky. Like, I tagged him in a reply. So, I wanted to make sure that, just as I knew he would want to see this tweet or the skeet, I apologize. And he reposted it and said he was thankful for Severance podcasts like ours.
Yes.
So does that mean he's definitely listened to the podcast? Not necessarily.
Definitely, there's a lot of wiggle room in there for sure. It could have just been like a real kind thing that he did. Like, hey, I love all the Severance people. Your attention to detail. Happy Thanksgiving. Have one on the house. But I choose to believe, Melissa, that he's our number one listener.
I don't know if that's better or worse to think about Ben Stiller listening to us.
No,
just
it's
like
great.
rambling on about
He
this.
loves us. We love you, Ben.
It's great.
Yeah, big fans both ways.
It felt great. So huge shouts to Mr. Stiller for all of his incredible work, of course. Unless it's Ben Stillero, which I believe is an alter ego of his that is out there. Bizarro Ben Stiller
Be on the lookout for fakes.
Yeah, lots of frauds out there. Of course, we know that this is your favorite Severance podcast because this is the one where you get acrostic poems, you get deep dives into cool brain shit, and of course, you get all of the Ricken Laszlo hail that you could possibly ask for from this podcast. No churnus on this one, unfortunately. Of course, this is a informed guidance review of the UUR. This is not spoiler filled. We are taking into account people who are watching Severance for the first time, should be filled with details that will play for the people who are rewatching it as well. Make sure you're subscribed and you tell a friend to subscribe to the Severance podcast here.
I'm going to tell Ben Stiller.
Tell
He's my
Ben
friend.
Stiller to hit subscribe.
Close
That if he
personal
really
friend.
wants to put us over the top, he could get the word out that way. These are the things that we really want to be doing. And of course, if you go to weknowseverance.com, you'll have all that information right around just on the website. You just go, oh, that's how I do it. You can also send in feedback to severancerhap@gmail.com. That's severancerhap@gmail.com. Get your feedback read on the podcast. This week's feedback comes from Kendra. Would you all like to hear what Kendra had to say?
Yes, please.
Kendra has some experiences. This recap is refreshing Kendra's memories in a couple of different ways. Kendra writes, enjoying this recap to refresh my memory before season 2 begins. In the spirit of fun facts, my whole family is from New Jersey. Not me, born and raised West Coaster here. And my grandfather worked at that Bell Labs building for 30 years as a telecom engineer. At one time, he was the world's leading expert on lightning and impacts on the telecommunications system. It's interesting to think about him commuting to work every day in the 60s and 70s. I hope you take the time to appreciate this fact, but not any more than any of the others. Thank you, Kendra.
Incredible.
Amazing feedback, Kendra.
Now I want to know, like, okay, who is the world's foremost expert on lightning in the 1960s?
I mean, yeah, this is always the funniest thing about expertise in general, but I always think grad school just makes it so funny where you're like, I am the leading expert on a thing that no one else has ever thought to be a leading expert on.
Maybe one of us is the world expert on lightning right now.
It's possible.
It's possible. Nobody's like, I haven't seen anybody else claim it.
I haven't seen anyone else claim it either, but I suppose it is hard to capture lightning expertise in a bottle.
Well done. Yep.
Thank you. It was all right. Okay, let's talk about the episode that we're here to talk about. We'll give you a Jessica Sterling, Jesse S. written quick plot recap. We'll talk through some of our highlights, and then we will give out all of our superlatives on our quest to find the refiner of the quarter here in season 1. So here we go. Season 1, episode 4. It is confirmed. Petey has died, but his cell phone is still very much alive and constantly vibrating in a box that Mark threw it in. Outie Mark sees Petey's obituary and decides to attend his funeral, where he bumps into Miss Selvig, who is there to retrieve Petey's severance chip. Miss Selvig notices a somberness to Mark and decides to get his innie some wellness treatment, where he sculpts what appears to be the tree his late wife crashed into out of clay. Meanwhile, Irving is bonding with Bert from O&D and even gets a tour. On his way back to MDR, he finds Ricken's book, The UUR, left unattended in a conference room. He reports it to Mark, as all non-cure books are contraband. And if you didn't think Lumen was culty before, now you know. And Mark promises to take the book to Milchek, but he secretly keeps it hidden away after destroying Petey's map in front of the team. Speaking of Milchek, he makes Helly recite the apology in the break room 1,072 times before releasing her back to MDR. Interestingly, she also hears a man mumbling while in the break room, while Dylan says that he once heard children crying. She takes drastic action to get out of here. She threatens to cut off her fingers if they don't let her send in a resignation video to her outie, but her outie, it seems, might be even colder than Miss Coobel. She rejects the resignation and says, "You're not even a person." We leave the episode on a very harrowing note as Helly hangs herself in the elevator using an extension cord, which is exactly what Melissa flagged as the content warning heading out of last week's episode. And I will say I did notice on the start of this episode, whether it was put in after the fact or not, a content warning about this heading into episode 4. So that's what happened. I mean, this was, I remember we were all just floored by this when we watched it in the real time. We provided resources at the time. We want to make sure we do that again here. Melissa, you've provided in the chat. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7 in the U.S. at 1-800-273-8255. In Canada, it's Crisis Services Canada.ca to find the crisis line number for your local area. We'll put this in the show notes as well. But even knowing that it's coming, Melissa, I think no less upsetting to watch this scene.
Yeah, like part of the reason why this episode is such an igniting one for this show is because it is both showing some of the, great frivolity of the UUR at the same time.
Lots of wiles in this episode.
Yeah, at the same time that we were exploring the depths of despair that Helly is feeling now, having been rejected by her outie via this video. Every attempt that she's made has been thwarted, and so she is feeling absolutely hopeless about this. And it's a devastating, gut-wrenching watch to see her walk down that hallway again, and just imagine. It's tough to even imagine what it must be like to be in that situation where you have so little and to be that miserable about what is the very limiting, awful situation that you're in, and you've tried to escape it and are unable to. It's a great metaphor for mental health in general, I think, but it's it's a really tough watch.
Yeah. The feeling of hopelessness, I think, is definitely what's so powerful about Helly's character and Britt Lauer's performance. And right out of the gate on this rewatch, I was struck by the spirit and the fight that we see in Helly, from the very, very beginning, and the way that the universe of the severed floor at Lumen sort of systematically beats that out of this, person over time. And it's very much, obviously, we've talked quite a bit about how the show is playing on these ideas about what can be oppressive about work culture in general, but it's replacing the actual joy and rewards of life with these very feeble substitutes. So things like tracking your percentage, you're 4% done on this file, and now you can get these reward incentives, and we're a family. Even though you don't have a family on the outside, this experience is family. And that is the substitute for all of the richness of life that, is what sustains us as humans. And even the wellness center as the supposed antidote to that desperation is itself very kind of flimsy and insufficient. So we see systematically Helly is beaten down. We get the very vivid experience of the break room. And what I thought was so powerful was the way she leaves the break room at the end of the day to the elevator. And then we get that experience of immediately it's the next day.
Yeah.
And from the Innie's perspective, she has experienced no relief from that psychological torture of being made to repeat this over and over and over again. So it zaps her of all of that spirit. She's left with nothing. And the scene where we see, I would love to hear people talk about seeing Helly's outie in this video is the last straw that really robs her of any kind of hope she might have.
Yeah, it's this feeling of oh, I guess I must be a monster. And so what even happens if I get out of here? So the depths of despair feel, I don't know, they feel very on the surface, very easy to grasp in a show that's as fantastical and high concept as this one. a fairly like grounded portrayal of why we might see Helly go to the lengths that she goes to in this one.
Yeah, like she literally says, I am a person, you are not. I make the decisions, you do not. Like it's Helly is being robbed of her personhood, any sort of agency that she might have in this situation by herself, which is, I think, the most twisted part of it. And it's, yeah, like, and the thing that I thought was really interesting that I picked up on that scene that I don't think I did in the first watch is the other Innies watching that video. Because the other three of them are in the room also watching. And I think it's a real catalyst for all of them for the events that will happen in the rest of the episode. The fact that like every single one of them, I think, is starting to sort of think outside of maybe the little confined box that they had grown accustomed to. We've got them reading the UUR. Irving is like going on a date. I don't know.
I'm going on a date.
Yeah. So even the most kind of into it all in Irving is starting to be like, oh, but maybe this isn't enough. Maybe there are more things that I want than just finger traps and waffle parties.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the exciting things about this inflection point in season 1 is that we start to get the Innies and Mark's outie, like kind of from their perspectives, trying to solve the mysteries of Lumen. And it kind of becomes, we see that Mark on the outside has Petey's phone. He goes to the funeral. He's getting information. Mark on the inside is reading the UUR, is looking at the map. And then, of course, we know that that map gets shredded. But like the idea that you team up with yourself in another version of the world to solve a mystery is a really, really fun aspect of the show.
Totally. And I think also is another way in which like sort of the metaphors in play on Severance are just like dramatized so well. Like how often do you like confront a problem in real life that you're trying so hard to muscle your way through or think your way through, and you just cannot find a solution, but you get in touch with like some other facet of yourself. You're able to like see things from a different perspective. You have some kind of eureka. It's almost like this piece of you that's within you suddenly wakes up. And it's just like the ways in which you are incentivized by the world to not be so in touch with yourself. I think that this is a show that really explores how the work culture and capitalism like dives into that and divides us up, not just from each other, but from ourselves. And so to start to get like a little bit into that where Mark does not know that the book he is reading, that this, this revolutionary tome was written by his doofus brother-in-law, but Mark S. is getting a lot out of it. Yeah, I think the ways in which the cables are connecting in this episode in that way, like really, really, really well done. Really, really well done.
Yeah. I think it's so, and we get this, like, it's interesting, especially because I think it's this still push and pull, particularly for Mark, but I think for like the others as well, where I think Mark is interested in these things and he's, questioning things, and he's clearly not like 100% bought into everything. But at the same time, he is trying to keep the peace, and he's trying to sort of hold on to things because, again, it's the only thing he knows. And so I think that there's this kind of inner conflict for him about like, this is not enough. And I am, unhappy and unsettled, but also anything else could be anything else. And I don't know what that could be. And it could be worse for all you know. Right. And so it's, like this back and forth between Mark and Helly, where Helly tells Mark to go lick a boot, and he calls the work mysterious and important. And
the work is mysterious and important.
Yeah. And we deal with the uncertainty it brings us, as Kieran intended, together and as a family. And she says, I could not be less interested in being your family. And it's just so interesting to me that this is the same guy who is then reading the UUR in the bathroom, right? And so he's clearly started like interested in these other ideas and starting to think about this, but at the same time is like, I think, deeply unsettled by it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how Mark and Irv and Dylan sort of represent these three very different ways of coping with the Lumen workplace culture. And Irv starts out as this just total devotee believer in the cause, like fully bought into all of the spiritual overtones, can quote the handbook on command, and like finds a lot of meaning in being part of Lumen. Dylan responds like very much to the incentives. He's like a mindset grindset. He's going to min max. He's going to get as many of those finger traps and waffle parties as he can rack up. And that to him sustains him. And Mark is like kind of a different animal. And he's very much the guy who like goes through the motions because he doesn't want the hassle of doing something more resistant. Like he doesn't believe in it. He doesn't see a lot of value in the incentives the way that Dylan does. But we know from his outiness, is like so avoidant of conflict and pain that if the path of the least resistance is to just, make sure you stay out of the break room and basically do what Milchek says, like that's his way of coping in this world. And what we start to see in this episode is each one of those kind of pillars that have allowed these three characters to, subsist in this kind of really depraved environment. It's starting to come apart a little bit at the seams for all three of them.
Yeah, definitely. I want to spend a little bit of time, at least, on top side, above ground, because we are dealing with somebody who is about to be below ground, tragically, in the form of Petey, who it is confirmed he's gone, but we do get one last, and I think one truly great final Yul Vasquez performance here, playing Metallica, Enter Sandman, with his daughter, who is a hell of a guitarist. As we see firsthand, but it's this great moment where we go to the funeral, Melissa, and it's Severance doing what Severance does best. It's like this big, really kind of emotional moment that also has like sort of this like electric undercurrent with the electric guitar, while Patricia Arquette is power drilling into a dead body's brain.
She's so lucky that this funeral service featured a heavy metal rock number, because you can't always count on that. And I don't know if the drill would have gone unnoticed if this was a typical funeral service.
I know that, life is not like TV, but I have I have yet to go to a heavy metal funeral, and it's not like I'm wishing that upon the people who I think will have heavy metal at their funerals in my life, but I am also kind of saying, like, once it happens, I'm looking forward to the heavy metal renditions of all of their favorite songs.
Yeah, my partner does a lot of metal karaoke, so I'm definitely
I did not know, and we'll need to see at some point.
I not the most surprising fact about him.
Nope, I'm unsurprised, but deeply curious.
Yeah, but yeah, I actually we were watching the episode together.
Unnamed character, on the podcast.
Yeah, but he was mentioning that because he's predicting that we're going to see a lot of Pink Floyd in stuff going forward, because they recently bought the rights. Somebody recently bought the rights to all of the Pink Floyd album, and apparently that had happened with Metallica shortly before this opening, so that was sort of it. But as Coobel is like doing the drill and the lyric is the monster in your head, I was just like, it's too perfect. It's so good.
It's quite good. It's quite good. It's quite scary. But what she's after, going for Petey's severance chip, which seems to be because she believes that he had either reintegrated or was close. And we need to have that evidence if that's the case. But no one is really believing in reintegration the way she is. This is how desperate she is, Amanda, that she has to put herself on the line like this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think that this gives us quite a bit of information about Severance and about Coobel's role in Lumen, which is still, she seems like the big bad, at least in terms of the MDR apartment, but maybe is a little bit more of a middle management type of gal. And a couple of things that I thought were interesting about this is first, we learn that whatever reintegration process Petey has gone through did not involve extracting this severance chip. So that is like a question. There was not a neurosurgical procedure that that resulted in extracting that. The chip is still inside of Petey until he is liberated of it by Ms. Selvig. And then the other thing is that there's going to be at some point Melchek, when he sees it on the table, or maybe it's Grainer, says, "Oh, that's Petey." So it really makes you wonder what information is in that chip that is going to be useful to Coobel in making this case that reintegration has happened. Like, is this recording in some ways his memory or experience? Like, will this be something that will offer some kind of proof of reintegration or give us some insight into what Petey is experiencing? Is the chip another form of surveillance, right? Because we've talked about all of the layers of surveillance. And then again, this kind of reiterates that Coobel is like a little bit of a renegade here, and that she is not in lockstep with the rest of the Lumen board. But her devotion to Kier does seem pure. We do get the scene where she is sitting at her desk and starts murmuring the 9 core Lumen principles as she adoringly admires a photo of Kier. I love these principles: vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, and everybody's favorite, wiles.
All of those, by the way, feel like actual names for magazines that would exist.
Oh, totally. Good idea. Yeah.
Only nimbleness, nimbleness, I would cut, but
maybe
the rest
like
of them, I feel like
a yoga magazine.
But like Verve as a magazine, 100%.
Verve is a magazine. Verve is a magazine. Verve is probably top on the board.
Probity
is a fascinating magazine.
Really exciting people subscribe to Probity. I think I mentioned this when we did our original watch, but this really reminds me of the Girl Scout law. Like, we had to chant, like, I will do my best to be cheerful, to be helpful and obedient. Like, we had a list of these things that they made us recite. So maybe Coobel's devotion is to Kier and the Kier handbook, and we still don't really understand where the current leadership of Lumen is in relationship to whatever biblical text Irving is always citing. We also hear Bert cite some of it. Like, there's might be some disconnect between believing in the greatness of the man Kier and being in lockstep with Lumen's current leadership.
Yeah. Which is like, I don't know which is scarier, if this is Coobel like on assignment and like or if this is Coobel gone rogue. Truly not sure which is worse for these people.
Yeah, I think this is definitely rogue Coobel, right? Because Grainer's like, oh, the board hasn't acknowledged reintegration. They haven't even
acknowledged this is real.
Yeah, and so meanwhile she's like, okay, but like, go test this, basically to maybe prove that is what's going on here. And I love she's just sitting there with the finger trap as he walks out. I was like, what is happening right now?
Angrily fidgeting with that finger trap.
Always be fidgeting. Well, that I feel like is a great segue into talking about some of our superlatives and getting through the rest of the episode that way. Of course, we are doing Kier incentives here on the podcast this time around, handing out erasers for theories, finger traps for folks who are in danger. I think we covered the finger trap for this episode, unless anyone's going to have anything to add there. Music dance experience, which is best vibes. Caricature portrait, which is funniest. And we all have somebody that we're putting forth towards the Waffle Party, who is our MVP of each and every week. And of course, we're giving out Mark's Crystal Head Cube. It's not a prize. It's just a thing we are giving out. So let's start with erasers, theories. What's up? What's going on with this voice in the break room, Melissa?
Yeah, that's the main one for me. It's like, and so the interesting thing, so I think it's very notable that you sort of hear something when Helly's in there, and then when Helly's talking about it with Dylan hears a crying baby, and Helly hears an angry man, and based on where we go,
difference.
Yeah. Same vibe.
Corporate wants you to find the difference between these two pictures.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I think those two things are different enough that it sort of implies that maybe it's different things for different people. And is that like a part of the torture of the break room? Is there something else with that? Is it like some way in which something is sort of subconsciously triggering in the outie self that's like raising certain emotions in the innie self? Like, I don't know what is totally going on there. And then again, to give my partner credit, we were watching and he asked if Milchek is wearing noise canceling headphones in the break room so that he is immune to whatever this effect is, which I was like, oh, I actually like hadn't thought about the headphones before, because there's like zero reason for him to have to wear them for the situation. So there's an idea.
Right. I think that's a fascinating observation of like, is there some sort of like hypnosis type deal going on there that he wants to avoid?
Yeah. And then the other one that I was just questioning is the O&D of it all. The fact that we see like this massive department with these seemingly like 3D printers, maybe.
What in the wet F are they doing in there, Melissa?
Yeah. And so I like still don't have any sort of great theory other than the fact that, you know, the two of this 2-person department is clearly some sort of front. But it's, like, it's not only the fact that there's something going on, but like the fact that it's hidden even from like the other departments on the severed floor means that it feels like it's got to be a really like important aspect of what's going on down there.
Yeah. So I really love Felicia, who we get to meet a little bit more in this episode. And then like, I really, really love the Irving and Bert. If you want to call it a date, it feels like a date.
Yeah.
They hold hands, you know, like our hearts were exploding out of our chests watching this stuff in the real time. So if this is your first run, we hope it's the same for you. But then it does have like sort of like this like sinister undertone when Irving goes back, and it's like you found out that perfect first date, Amanda, like I don't want to say like they were a serial killer all along, but like there was something funky in the closet that we didn't know about.
Can we trust Bert with Irving's tender heart? I don't know. Obviously, he's been deceiving, not only Irving, but like this is, the public front, as Melissa said, for whatever the real operation is in optics and design. It's like very, very curious, like what is the purpose of this department? Anyway, we see Bert hanging a painting in one of the hallways, and we have never seen a painting in one of these hallways before, and people have actually traversed quite a bit of real estate in these halls. So the idea that there's a department that puts paintings up in the most stark, unadorned place that I've ever seen in my life is in and of itself very laughable. So this is a big question. That was my number one on the erasers board, was what is going on with O&D? The other eraser theory that I think we have to put a pin in is like, who is Helly's outie? Like, do we imagine that anybody, if they got this resignation video from their outie, would be this forceful and cruel? The Helly that we know from the inside is, very spirited, as I've said, like defiant, but this person that we see in the video is like a cold-hearted biatch. So it really starts to raise questions.
The technical term.
Yes, that's a clinical term. I say that.
This is cool brain shit.
As a psychologist. So this, I think, to me, puts a big like question mark, neon sign, like, who is this person on the outside?
Well, totally. I mean, like, who does it have to be to get the threat that like I was going to like take a paper cutter to my hand, and then Melissa decide like, yeah, but I'm like that, like you don't get to do that, and I'm gonna come back in. Like, who is that caliber of a person?
Yeah, and like, who is clearly like so believing of this situation that it's like has no sympathy for their innie in this situation, right? The fact that is them, like they can't even have sympathy for themselves in this situation, which is, I think, really interesting. A few other kind of small things. We've got Mark sculpting this tree in his wellness session. So clearly there's something, you know, it was that we saw as outie self. So it's like there's some sort of subconscious something going on for Mark there. And I think that just in general is sort of an idea of, I was sort of playing around with like, again, basically based on like these voices in the break room, like how are the innies affected by the outies subconsciously? So we sort of talked about, you know, Petey says like you carry the emotion with you. But I think
you never experienced sleep. I prefer to like focus on the effects of sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm just curious, like, if we will learn more as we go about how much influence the outie life has on the innie life.
Yeah.
In these like subconscious ways. So yeah.
Right. And I think like my last thing in this erasers corner of the world that I want to add is that we see Gemma's candle make its way into the wellness session. And we also see that Coobel is sort of orchestrating this and wants the candle to be part of it, and is maybe in the kind of idea that on some level, this is a psychological experiment. Is Coobel testing a theory of reintegration by taking something from Mark's life, of outside life, and putting it in the wellness session and seeing what effects it has? So this whole relationship that Coobel has to Mark as a potential subject, and that Miss Casey is involved in, and that the wellness sessions are a part of, I think is also something to put in this category of theories to try to figure out what is her agenda with this, and might she have a particular agenda that has to do with Mark?
Yeah. And I think like that idea of like, let's put Mark S directly in front of let's call it like an image that would be very, very clear and probably jarring to Mark Scout, should Mark Scout wake up in that moment, right? Like Mark Scout wakes up in that wellness room and is like, and has some questions, I'm sure. First of all, like, why am I in this wellness room? And then some other big questions would come up from that situation. So like, I think like if you're going to stress test, do these people know anything? Like, do they have any access to them? Like, it's a very good way to do it. But like some of my questions at this moment in time watching this show are like, is this just for science? Or does Harmony Coobel, like, is there like some very specific reason to be fixated on Mark beyond that? Don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? Because it is he's the one that she's living right next to. And yeah, it does seem like there is sort of a particularly close tie and focus on Mark. And I don't think it's just because he's our main character, right? And that's, you know, so yeah, I do think there's that. The other thing that is again totally not like a big thing, but in the severed floor world, there's a lot of blues and greens. In the intro, the like sort of innie Mark, like when they're lying in the bed together and there's kind of the innie Mark and the outie Mark next to each other, he's in this like all red suit.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sort of like, why is it red? Why is it not blue? It feels like it should be blue. So I don't know what that means. I've got no ideas, but I don't know if it's just like a symbolic.
Maybe hot off of making Escape at Dannemora, Ben Stiller
I've been watching that, by the way.
How far in are you?
I think I'm about 5 episodes in.
So did you get to Benicio del Toro's epic line read of "Don't tell anybody"?
I didn't remember that was what I was looking for. Very good. Yeah, I think that's everything that I have for erasers. And if we are moving on to the MDE, if you'll allow it, Melissa, because you mentioned colors, I wanted to call out that I think that the best vibes come from seeing the UUR book like in its warm colored tones against the very stark and cold and cool colors of Lumen. And like the scene where we see that book just like sitting on the chair, like there's something this show is so beautiful. I mean, I think we could just talk about the vibes of the mise en scène and the camera work and everything in terms of the set design. But this contrast of the beautiful Michael Chernus, his face like the sun shining, and this warm colored book in this otherwise very, very bare and cold colored world, I thought was excellent vibes. Love it.
And speaking of red, right? Like if we're trying to track like why is he in the red jumpsuit? Well, is he getting radicalized by a red book?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. The UUR in general is just such a good vibe. And it's, I know we've like in previous podcasts, like pulled out everything, you know, we've screenshot and like read everything that we could see on it. And we've done the deep dive and broken down the acrostic poem. And it's so worth it because it's so well done. It's so funny. And like, it's written by, I think, the equivalent of like a first-year philosophy major.
Generous, Melissa.
Yeah. I mean that with all the intent to the first-year philosophy majors out there who are starting to think about like bringing together kind of disparate ideas and metaphors for life and deeper things, but it's like not quite reached any sort of refined level. And I mean, no shade, but I used to have to bartend grad student events, and every now and then they're like, you know brain stuff, let's talk about that. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you about this. Come back to me in 4 years.
I don't think that this is going to spoil anything other than to say like we will get more passages from this book. And I know that we have in previous podcasts like pulled some of the quotes, and I don't know that we get all of these in this episode, but
yeah,
can I just like give a couple that I like, and we'll have other chances to do more. I want to thank the Severance Apple TV Plus subreddit for having a great thread where everyone's having a party remembering the UUR. It was not me that was wrong, but literature itself. So I had to break it. It is incredible. Yeah. Bullies are bull and lies. In the center of industry is dust.
That one's still pretty deep.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
They can't crucify you if your hand is in a fist. Very powerful stuff.
Beautiful, beautiful words. We don't get a lot of that yet in this episode, but we're going to get more of the UUR. The thing that is, obviously, it's very, very funny. And like Ricken is a little bit of a fool. And I like say that in the kind of literary Shakespearean sense. I think that's partly his function, but
I kind of feel like What a Fool Believes would be a great Ricken Hale theme song.
Yeah, do that on karaoke, Chernus.
Put some Michael McDonald. Can we do a heavy metal karaoke version of What a Fool Believes?
Yeah, I'm never gonna do that because if somebody is like drilling into my head in the other room,
want to participate.
I don't want to make it easier for them.
I understand.
But the brilliance of the UUR is that to us it seems like very, very trite and derivative and foolish, but to these innies who are starved for any kind of philosophy or literature or art outside of what Lumen offers, which we hear Irving quote say, "Be content with my word and dally not in the scholastic pursuits of lesser men." So we know that like the only art they see is what O&D is putting on the walls, and it's all depictions of the handbook. The only literature that they read is a handbook for a job. And so they're so hungry for anything. And these very trite words become revolutionary and evocative, and they set, Mark's mind on fire. The quote that we get here is that, your job needs you. You don't need your job. So this is like, even though it's the kind of silliest version of what could be the thing to ignite this new way of thinking, because the innies are in such a unique position of being kind of totally blank slates, kind of infants and born into this world. This becomes like totally, totally revolutionary to them. And it like reminds me of when I first started watching like formulaic network sitcoms with my kids. It killed them. Like they couldn't believe how hilarious it was that, these very tired tropes with a laugh track, like it blew their minds. Like they thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And it's because I'm a bad mother and I didn't raise them with good taste. No, it's because like they just didn't have that context to understand that like, young Sheldon is not, a revolutionary comment. No offense to young Sheldon, but
he's not listening.
He's Ben Stiller is listening,
Ben Stiller listening, young Sheldon not listening.
So it's really fascinating and it's really exciting and it's played for comedy, but it's also somewhat inspirational to see it like spur this transformation in our characters.
The only other MDE I have for this is the music, if not dance experience of Enter Sandman at Petey's funeral, which is one of my favorite scenes from the season. I do think I want to like. I wish that we were a fly on the wall in like that garage as they were making it, because I feel like they had to have had like 2 camera people. Like I feel like there's like some cuts. Like we get different angles. Like
it's quite the performance. Yeah.
What a production. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. You could do some insight like lyric analysis of Enter Sandman. It's certainly about,
and we have
yes, that's right. You could do you could look really deeply into it. It is a song about the Sandman and not the Spider-Man villain, but the concept of getting put to sleep, going to sleep, all of that very relevant to Severance here. It's not as fun to analyze that as the UUR, so I'm not particularly interested in doing it. I am kind of interested in the idea that that Coobel has to do what she has to do to retrieve the chip. So this is going back to like another like sort of like eraser that I had earlier. We were talking about how whatever happened with Petey for reintegration to begin, and clearly it goes poorly for him since we're at his funeral, did not require the chip being taken out. I'm sure once upon a time we batted this around, but just for the sake of like renewed memory for me at least, if we didn't have this conversation before, like Melissa, once this is like in there, is it like excruciatingly dangerous to take that out? Because I would think that the way to like undo it, wouldn't it be to like, well, get it out of there?
Well, because I think if you remember when we saw it being implanted, it's got the little like things that go out, right?
Yeah.
So that I think is like the whole point of basically so that it doesn't like continue to travel through your brain. Which would be bad.
It needs to get a grip.
This is where it goes. Yeah. So I imagine that extraction would be difficult and painful. And it's not really an area that you want to be like mucking around in if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I guess it's the physics of it all is that, if you are inserting something that is a point, you can sort of have a relatively direct route that does not go through a lot of, that minimizes the amount of tissue that's disturbed. But once you want to dig that toy out from the bottom of the cereal box, you're going to have to disturb a lot of brain tissue along the way to get it. Melissa loves the anatomical correctness, and like she goes in through the temple, and we said that that's kind of the medial temporal structures are where memory is housed, and that's where we saw the implant go in. So she actually finds it pretty expeditiously.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with that. And it doesn't even seem that messy.
Well, if you're going to do a heist, you're supposed to prepare, right? So like maybe like night before, she's just like reading the manual over.
It's the wiles, Josh.
Yeah,
she has
wiles.
Yeah.
Like it should be, this whole thing should be wetter than it is. And like squishier.
Yeah.
There's not enough like loopy sounds as she's like drilling through brain. That is
that's the benefit of that heavy metal.
Yeah, like it's much more like your brain's just like chilling in a salt solution, and it's very gushy.
I don't know what the embalming process though, like what has gone on. I watch a lot of 6 Feet Under, so
you should know by now.
Have done
Ariel podcast is about all 6 feet under and crying laughing every day.
No, you're right. That's because I have done like brain
they drain
autopsies,
a lot of the fluids out,
and and then in the autopsy, the brain like sits in formaldehyde for like a week before you can like slice it and look at what happened to it, which is very cool, by the way.
Did you say you've taken brains out before?
I have not. I have attended brain autopsies, and the like oh gosh, what would the doctor title be?
The pathologist, or
I guess so. Yeah, like a neuropathologist will look through and like dictate what they're seeing. So it was like a good chance for. So I went there during grad school when I was like learning about different things. So for example, I saw like brain with dementia and the after effects of that. So different things like that. But yeah, so maybe the embalming process is more involved.
They dry everything out. They put in some different stuff. Anyway, so
Amanda, have you taken brains out before?
I haven't taken them out, but pigs. I've been around a lot of pigs.
Okay. I'm used to taking out brains with my podcasts.
There you go. Yeah.
But not
I did
blowing minds, Josh.
Amanda, did you have to take a neuroanatomy course as part of your?
I did not have to take a neuroanatomy course, but I did work in a wet lab that did a lot of animal model research about traumatic brain injury, and that's where we did the pig studies, and it's it's not my favorite thing.
No, the traumatic brain injury animal models particularly are quite sad to think about. But I in my neuroanatomy, it was like humans who had like donated their bodies after death, and so it was like all of the different brain structures all like cut up and spread out, and we were learning about all like the 9 nerves. It's been a minute, folks. I think it's 9 different nerves that kind of travel from the brain, and that was a very extensive class.
Well, let's go to that. From that to let's go from scooping brains out of people's heads to the caricature portrait, the funniest stuff. My candidate, I mean, the UUR is like the very obvious low-hanging fruit for this, but there are some choice quotes in this episode. Melissa, you already got like one of the biggies.
I mean, I pity the husbands, right? Like it's just from the moment Dylan grabs the stapler when Bert walks in, and I was like, what are you going to do, man? And then, when he's like, the key to the break room is to think about something you're actually sorry about. I imagine my Audi is out there, banging MILFs.
Love
with
making the MILFs.
Yeah. So I
do pity the husbands.
I pity the husbands. It's just, it stands out to me so much. It's the only other one that also gets me is Irving with the book, where he's like, I bet it's a loyalty test. Remember the spicy candy. And I was like, I don't know what that's about, but I love it so much.
We'll never know what the spicy candy is. Spicy candy is a mystery that will last forever. I think we speculated that it's probably like when you think you're getting very cherry, but you get cinnamon instead.
It's harsh. Yeah.
Not that like, like in the right context, cinnamon is great. But if you're not expecting it, no way. That's spicy candy, and I don't appreciate that. What kind of lesson were they being taught that day?
Don't eat candy that doesn't belong to you.
Don't eat candy.
Good one.
Yeah, I mean, the UUR stuff is great. Dylan is so funny. I don't know if my instinct is to spread the love around, and if I have to honor the parts of this episode that absolutely just take me out, I can barely handle how funny it is Bert's delivery of so many of these lines. And just like, I mean, I love Christopher Walken in this role. He's so intensely bizarre, but also very sweet and very funny. When he first comes to MDR, he says, Irving, I kept thinking about what you said about being all excited about the handbook totes. And well, maybe you were kidding a tease. And that he's been fretting all this time. He didn't want the anticipation to distract Irving from his important work, which was the opposite of my intent. Like, it's just, I mean, Christopher Walken is one of those people who you would literally listen to him read the phone book.
Yes.
His delivery is so unique and so uniquely funny. And the lines that he's given are hilarious, and he nails it. I have to give the caricature portrait this week to Bert for just knocking every line out of the park.
I love that. I think that's great. This is like our in some ways I think like our biggest Bert episode yet. And you get Christopher Walken on your TV show, you better not miss. And this show does not miss at all. I don't mean to take it back to Dylan, but he also talks about disemboweling people's bowels, and I just think that line is really good too.
It's great.
Yeah, it's the what in the wet F are you doing here?
Yeah, it's just unreal, unbelievable. All right, let's advance someone towards the waffle party. We each get to choose who we want to push closer to being refiner of the quarter. Dr. Melissa, who are you putting towards the waffle party this time out?
So it's a bit of a weird one because he doesn't actually appear in this episode, but I feel like his impact is so important to the events of this episode that I want to give it to Ricken.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, like, he's not even in the episode, but his
for what it's worth, I have also given it to Ricken.
Yeah.
This will be the first time that someone gets doubled up in the same week. How can you not? The arrival of the UUR is
shaking everything up,
shaking it all up. He's changing hearts and minds that he doesn't even know exist.
Yeah.
I went in a different direction for this one. I think this is a great Irving episode, and I think he does a lot that like drives the momentum of the show forward. He discovers the UUR book. He's the one who brings it to everyone's attention. He also is the one who discovers what's going on in O&D. He has his date with Bert. We love that. He gets a new handbook tote. Like, love that for him. I think, I gave the caricature portrait to Bert, but we get a lot of Irv delivering the handbook text in this episode, which I think is really great. But this is an episode in which I think it's not only a big evolution of Irving as a character, like obviously we see that he's entertaining these more subversive ideas that he's been very, very closed off to in the past in terms of going and meeting other departments and maybe doing things that he shouldn't be doing. I think that represents a lot of growth for him. He also seems to be part of this budding romance plot, which I absolutely adore. So I think that this is a great episode for Irving.
Well, with you giving an MVP to Irving, and with Melissa and I doubling up on the he is in Ricken Laszlo Hale, and previously Irving getting a point in week 2, Helly getting a point in week 1, and in week 3, we've got a 3-way tie at the top right now between Helly, Irving, and a new fighter has arrived. Ricken Laszlo Hale. So we'll see if they can keep running away with it, or if someone's going to break ahead, or if someone, as Ricken is a disruptor, as we know, and he has just arrived to disrupt the Waffle Party contenders. So we'll see what it goes into with week 5. Crystal head cubes. I think I'm giving mine to the book totes.
Nice.
They're very cool and very exciting to arrive at MDR, and I just want to like give some props to Bert's handiwork.
Yeah. I wanted to sort of, first of all, just the whole, I sort of missed throwing it in there, but my whole like MDE for best vibes is just all of the Bert and Irving like date and their little like hand holding and everything that I think is just adorable. But my crystal head cube is going to June to talk about particularly like this interaction that Outie Mark has with the family, where it seems like Petey's wife is like, oh, so you didn't know him at all. Like that's just how she views it. And I think
ex-wife,
by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this idea of how other people interact with the Outies who are severed. And when June basically, first of all, for, you know, killing it in this performance, but then also this conversation with Mark of like, did you ever think that dealing with your problems, the best way to do that is not just shutting out for most of the day? And it made me think about what are the reasons why everybody else who is severed is down here. What is the thing they're avoiding in their life? And maybe for Petey, it is this, you know, dissolve of his marriage. We don't really know, but yeah.
Yeah. I gave my head cube to June too, because it's great to see this new character on the scene. And the other thing I went to Mark Scout about the funeral interaction between Outie Mark and June is that he kind of gives himself up in like knowing who she is, which I think is interesting, that he sees her and says, oh, you must be June. But we know that any Mark would have no way of knowing that. Outie Mark would have no way of knowing that unless he had gotten some knowledge of Petey from the outside, which we don't think he has. So I thought that was just an interesting thing to make note of.
Definitely. So there is, you know, Petey was trying to keep a lid on this a little bit, but what does that open up? Him, you know, having that sort of revealed in front of this character.
Yeah, he tells Coobel like, "Oh, I saw he worked at Lumen, so I assume I knew him," which is sort of his like kind of, which is a bit of like a, feels like a bit of a stretch, right? Like nobody else from Lumen is showing up having that same thought, but yeah, and then like. It's like, oh, you're June. Like clearly Mark knows something.
Can I ask a question about hibiscus wraps? Is that something that you eat or like a spa treatment that you get?
I would think it's a spa treatment. I think and how would, if it was food, how would it work? Is it like the hibiscus is the wrap, or is it what's inside the tortilla?
I don't know.
I think it's got to be a spa treat, especially because I think she's talked before about like, I want to say like foot baths and like bath bombs and stuff. I feel like that's the vibe.
That I understand. Like you buy the bath bomb and you go to your house and then you use it in your own bath. But I've never like in my home wrapped myself in a thing. Like is she giving spa treatments, or is like Petey getting the hibiscus wraps and going home and finding a totally awesome robe and then putting himself in a wrap?
Amanda, I'm going to throw out this theory that I don't think the hibiscus wraps really exist. I don't think Petey was going to buy hibiscus wraps.
That's why I think this is a bad cover story.
Yeah.
As always, when it comes to matters of the taste buds and the stomach, I turn to my wife, professional chef, the great Emily F. Emily F, who is still typing. I asked her, do people cook with hibiscus how would you cook with it?
Yeah. I've had a hibiscus drink. I've had many.
Yeah.
I have too.
Drink.
I've had a lot of really nice like hibiscus sodas.
If she says they make wraps, I'm gonna fall out of my chair.
I don't think that she's saying that they make wraps. She says that she makes cocktails with hibiscus syrup, agua frescas, and teas are made with it as well. But that it's also a huge staple in African American cooking. So it does get used. In what capacity? I would say what dishes? She says it creates a deeply rich color for natural food coloring and flavoring. Is what she says.
Okay.
So, could they be hibiscus wraps? Maybe.
Yeah, because my first thought when
if you're listening, please write in. Let us know.
Deep questions of severance.
severancerhap@gmail.com with all the intel you can provide on the hibiscus wrap.
Yeah, because I recently learned that sword ferns can like help with like stinging nettle if you get stung by it, to like find a sword fern and like stick it on. But although I spent a bunch of time Googling trying to understand why, and all Google would tell me was that it reduces the itch. And I'm like, right, but how? Why? What's going on? So Google was very unhelpful. So if anybody knows, basically everyone helped me name the So You Think You Can Dance that I couldn't think of. And now if anybody out there knows how sword ferns minimize the itch from stinging nettle, this is the stuff I want to know.
I don't even know how a wrap like works. Like I've never gotten one of these. Like I mean, not the food I know, but like you go like what do you like? They
never eaten a wrap.
I've never been like. Has anybody had a spa treatment where they like put?
I was gonna say, is it like a full body wrap?
I don't know. Like, I just really don't know. I feel like I've seen it. I mean, I don't know. I covered the White Lotus. Like, I feel like that might be a treatment you can get at the White Lotus.
Feels like that's where you would get it, but I don't know what parts of your body you're wrapping in hibiscus.
I just don't imagine people doing this in their own homes unless she has like a spa where she also administers her herbal treatment.
We're gonna get a litany of emails this week that are like, you three are not taking care of yourselves. Like,
yeah, we're not properly. Can I put a random theory? What if it's wrap, not WRAP, but RAP?
Yeah.
Or like spitting
better yet, RHAP.
I was going to say yes. And what if the hibiscus wrap is our future Severance Wanda?
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Or featured in a future Severance.
I love the idea that Petey goes back to this shop because the owner does really good wraps about hibiscus.
What if
she has bars, this woman?
I just want to throw it out to anybody who feels like they could perform a hibiscus wrap. Just a thought is you could also just organize it as an acrostic and just use hibiscus to talk about severance somehow. Even if you just want to write that in, we would accept that as well. Severance. Yeah. severancerhap@gmail.com. Severance RHAP @gmail.com is the email address. Mandy R, Melly W, either of you have anything else from this episode?
No, that was all my stuff. Yeah,
I think we covered it.
We have dried hibiscus in the cabinet. Should I order a wrap and put it on?
I think we spent as much time on hibiscus wraps as we did on, like many other of the topics that actually took place in the show. But I feel like that's what you can do on a rewatch pod.
Absolutely. Also, you could do it on like a regular watch pod if you have a second podcast in a given week, or B, if you just are very disrespectful of the listener's time. Either way.
You can, and we have.
Yeah.
And we are both.
we shall again here. So make sure you're subscribed for more like that. We know severance.com is what you want to look up. It's weknowseverance.com. Just search RHAP Severance. We Know Severance wherever you get your podcasts. Be like Ben Stiller. Spread the word. Let your friends and family know. Hit subscribe. Hugely helpful, especially as the new season approaches. January 17th. Coming up, we're almost at the halfway point. halfway into this next episode of Severance. We will be at the halfway point of our rewatch. Episode 5, The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design is what we're getting into next week.
It's exciting.
Very, very pumped about that. Follow me on the internet. I'm on Blue Sky at Round Howard. Dr. Amanda, where can people find you both on socials and as well as which podcasting?
Well, sally forth and follow me on Blue Sky. I am Dr. Amanda R. That's Dr. Amanda R. And you can also listen to my 6 Feet Under rewatch that I do with the great Ariel. We release episodes weekly. We also release bonus content on most weeks, and you can find us Crying Laughing Podcast in your podcatcher of choice, or follow the podcast on Blue Sky at Cry Laugh Pod.
Melly W, where are you at?
Yeah, Melissa Woodward 28 on Blue Sky, where I have made a few posts. I'm trying to do the social media, which is fine. So I otherwise Whirlwind Podcasts, we're talking Doctor Who, Veronica Mars, Pretty Little Liars, Smash, Schmigadoon. I think that's everything we got going on right now, but it's a lot. Stay tuned. Maybe some the aforementioned metal karaoke singer might appear on a podcast. So check it out.
All right. Check all that stuff out. Check out everything we've got going on We Know Scripted TV at weknowscriptedtv.com. Some new Star Wars on these streets. Dune is still happening. So lots you can check out here. Silo on Apple TV Plus as well. We're covering all that good stuff. weknowscriptedtv.com. The Severance Watch continues next week with the grim barbarity of optics and design. Until then, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.